Pontus Vippelius, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
In your 10, 12 years, whatever the amount is, it's a lot of time of experience doing SEO. You must have had so many things that you used before you maybe transitioned more into semantic SEO or maybe Coray's framework. A lot of that
Absolutely.
stuff worked, you know?
Yeah.
What today, after years of implementing this, what changed and what didn't?
I think somehow when you're coming from the basics and you're trying to find the next level, if you're stuck in kind of the keyword methodology, only working with that, which most people were previously, I would say that you don't really understand how to increase your hit rate, because sometimes you will succeed and sometimes you failed before. But the change that I saw when started implementing this type of framework is really that I noticed that I was able to increase the potential of succeeding with the things I was doing. So like going back, of course, you know that some of the basic stuff still works. It's not that, but it's just like being probabilistic and try to increase the chances of succeeding. That's what I found out with the framework.
That's a good way to describe it. I think it gives you additional tools. It doesn't erase everything else.
No, no, because like foundational, from a perspective, like we're working with search behavior, we have a lot of these ideas, and I know you mentioned in a podcast with Pavel also, like people are maybe overestimating search demand and so on, for sure, because we have been using these tools and we have been using keyword planner data since I started 15 years professional, 18 years as a hobby. So kind of this is what I've been living with. And the data has always been a struggle because we have never been able to truly trust it, no matter if it's from kind of only the keyword volumes or aggregated keyword volumes or whatever. So when you're trying to look at it from a more holistic point of view and actually looking at where are we generating value, where should we focus based on that, and trying to grasp the full puzzle instead of just going for small pieces of it, which essentially a keyword structure is. That's kind of what I mean, like, because you're able to gather more historical data and by that actually succeeding more often.
The concept of finding keywords and then mapping them to pages, creating those pages, it's great in the sense that it's so straightforward to do. It's
Yeah.
very easy and it does work. It doesn't mean that there isn't a better way to do it where you can get even better results. On the other hand, semantic SEO, sort of as a maybe framework or way of doing things, can be quite overwhelming and intimidating. When it comes to your e-commerce experience, how do you apply semantic SEO to an e-commerce store? Like, what are the nuances that are different? Because e-commerce is a bit of a different beast. It's a bit different than other websites.
Yeah, as I said, like during the last 3 years, I've been working a lot with ecom before, but during the last 3 years, I've been mainly working with ecom. And I think like I've sometimes struggled to implement kind of the full framework because some of the aspects are very kind of article heavy. And of course, you can build up a full topical map, but then you maybe kind of need to think about it in other perspectives because like it's not always what is generating the source, focusing on the source context, actually generating money value in terms of, the money pages and so on. So like, of course, in ecom SEO, it's more about thinking of it like, what kind of entities are we touching on and how are we building an entity structure and which kind of attributes are they connecting to in terms of that, and how can we kind of grasp all of those ideas and try to find a good structure of, in a kind of dynamic way, always approach it on a category page or a product page, or because essentially those are our core pages in the ecom setup compared to maybe working with other SaaS or article based or so on. It's another type of game. So I think sometimes it's hard to take the kind of the foundational framework because it's very kind of information heavy, but think about it more of a kind of an idea on building entity attribute value logics and implementing kind of the semantic aspects on the core pages where we can generate more historical data. Yeah, it's category content sometimes. Sometimes it's FAQs on products. Sometimes it's other things. But all of these elements can combine, build the kind of the topical map that cover the topical map that we actually want to cover in a good way.
What are the type of things you are putting on product pages that that you are making sure the product page has? And sometimes that is really important information that should be very close to the add to cart button and the shop button. And sometimes it's maybe more secondary information of maybe use cases or perspectives, like that stuff that maybe you would put on an FAQ. Like how do you go about thinking about content for product pages?
I think it's so like ecom for me is divided in so many different sectors, because if you're working with the D2C with like 20 products, you can go really in depth and run like all of the use cases, all of the kind of ingredients, materials, or whatever to try to touch on everything. Then you're working with kind of multi-brand stores where if you would go into depth on 100K SKUs, it would be impossible. So for me, it's like you have one side where you need to work with kind of template-based logics and try to utilize like FAQs from customers or reviews and those kind of things to fill the gaps. Because you can't do it at scale at 100K SKUs. So, and then you have the other kind of aspects where you're maybe, as I said, like a D2C with few products, and then you can really work with kind of all of the different aspects. It's so dependent on the product also, but we can talk about it from a fashion perspective. Then we have material, sizes, we have colors, we have all of the kind of lengths, width. So you have so many different perspectives of approaching that product just to cover the full spectrum of actually each product that also supports the cluster or the part of the topical map, and also connects to other areas of the site or other kind of breakdowns on category level where you know, as me, everyone that's working in e-com is a lot of about like, call it in the latest fashion programmatic SEO, but faceted categories, and being able to connect those clusters in a good way is also a kind of entity attribute structure where we essentially, yeah, all of the kind of with the tight size on some clothes or some kind of aspects. So I think you need to think about it from the product and the kind of the product and the attributes. That's essentially how I'm trying to connect it back to other money pages, but also the article side of the structure and the information side of it.
Example of, for example, a fashion brand. It's close to me because I have a couple of fashion brands as clients and I've worked with other ones in the past. Like they do a really good job of just through the product page interface. Like you've got usually have a size guide, you've got variants that have all the colors, and if they have good product descriptions, they talk about the material, and sort of the attributes are sort of there. Would you add anything else besides what, like that brief description that maybe the brand would use, or that is within the variations, like stuff that is sort of taken care of by the nature of the product? Would you add something else to that page, or would you sort of leave it at that?
I think it's also kind of dependent on if you are a D2C but maybe selling at resellers, then you want to find a kind of, call it information gain, or you want to find a kind of head start for you to be the unique source of content. Because the problem with being a brand is often that you distribute the kind of the content to a lot of retailers, e-tailers, whatever also. So if we think about it from that perspective, I would try to see like, okay, this is the distributed content in terms of what kind of knowledge we have about the product. And as I said, like then if we are the D2C, if we're actually the owner of the brand, I would try to find opportunities that actually would benefit the customers, because essentially in the end, all of the content should benefit the customer. So we shouldn't be adding anything if it's not benefiting. But if it's something about some knowledge that's not distributed yet, yeah, I would try to improve it. And it could be how it's created, or where it's created, or this kind of a lot of brands are more environmental friendly or having different kind of perspectives, and always connecting it back to those aspects. And in the end, like I've been saying it a couple of times now, but it's one attribute actually connected to the product that should be also connected to the brand, because that's essentially putting us in a specific kind of source context where we essentially are a fashion brand with some kind of connected attributes. And if we are talking about it connected to the products, where that's actually our money pages, our real money pages, even though we maybe generate more traffic sometimes from categories, etc. That's kind of how I would approach it, and that's the kind of the information I would try to add. But if you're already having all of this information, of course, there's nothing more to add in essentially. But often also playing with, often we're ending up playing with FAQs, and actually from a semantic perspective, really building nice triples to win AIOs connected to different aspects, where we actually can win a AI overview with the PDP and generating that kind of insight and connected to a specific segment of products or a specific product that could also be very valuable in a lot of cases. So it's so once again, always SEO, it depends, but so dependent on the situation.
It's like you really got to nail down, like in this specific case, like what happens, because if not, the answer is sort of it's hard to give. Could you give an example of what you just mentioned? I found that quite interesting, like winning an AI overview with a product. That's quite cool.
Yeah, like we've seen both on the, like normally we would say that most of the AIOs are represented on kind of informational queries, but I've seen so many situations where it's a kind of halfway through an informational query, like if I'm cleaning this or that, because essentially if we're working in those kind of industries, or if I'm washing wool in certain degrees, because this product is in that material, then you could win those kind of connected actually helpful product elements in terms of FAQs. Or we have also seen scenarios where it's more actually visible for actually almost category wide aspects, and in those situations it's rather like, okay, they're running like comparison, or they're running which kind of attributes is most important in terms of ingredients and so on, and then it's more about like building an FAQ on this product contains X, Y, and Z, and those are the best based on this and that. So it could be a lot of those kind of situations where you're working slightly around the actual products, but you're able to win very kind of powerful visibility and traffic also to PDPs when it's more beneficial to have it there than compared to maybe article or somewhere else on the site.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen a lot of maybe collection pages sometimes pop up, because AI overviews also they tend to appear in those type of queries, like where those rank a lot. And if you had like content on that page that maybe explains how to choose because imagine on a collection page you've got many products, so maybe you can talk about the attributes and features of the products listed there that are specific to that page, and maybe how someone would choose which one to buy, and buying conditions and things like that. And when you have that type of content, I've seen that get pulled in. But I guess it could be sort of the same. You could do something very similar on a product page, and it just depends where you put it. What gets
exactly. In the end, it's so dependent also if you, as I said, like if you have just one SKU or a few SKUs in a segment, or if you're a brand with like, and maybe sometimes we have maybe one SKUs in a category, and then it would end up on the PDP because we can't have a category with one product. It wouldn't make sense in that situation. So dependent on the search intent and the SERPs, of course. But yeah, sometimes we end up with those situations, and then we should maximize the potential, and we can end up with very kind of heavy PDPs in some of those situations. But yeah, I would say in most cases is still kind of building a templated smart structure because you often have more than like 20 or 50 SKUs. That's the most common case.
Yeah, the one product brands are a very special case.
Yeah.
They're not that simple to deal with. Have you worked with one product brands? Like do you have some
Not maybe
experience
one
there?
product brands, but brands that has like very few SKUs in every category. Like they maybe have like 10 products, and they have one product for this and one product for that. Maybe like supplements is one example where some of the brands maybe have one magnesium and one something else, and then you end up in those situations where the PDPs are maybe more important than the categories and so on. So yeah.
How in those cases, how will you deal with like this one product, let's say magnesium, can help so many different things. So people can
Yeah.
search by pain point, and this product would be relevant for them to fix it. But they're not even searching maybe for the product itself. How would you deal with that situation?
I think supplements is one of the kind of really good examples of building topical authority in ecom, because that's, as you said, that's more kind of problem. It's a problem approached area where people are more searching for a problem, or they're not even aware of the product. Sometimes they may be struggling with sleeping or struggling with something else. So in those cases, there is often a more kind of article heavy structure compared to the PDP actually being not the most traffic, the biggest traffic driver, even though, because you can't compete on, if you are that brand, it's at least very hard to compete with kind of the e-tailers, maybe like having 100 brands with a category page. So I think you have two opportunities. Is like, as that brand, you need to approach it from the opportunity of winning the user slightly earlier, which of course is a bit more of a challenge now with AIOs compared to before in working on the article side. But the other thing that I've been focusing quite a lot on lately is also kind of the popular products elements, because I think that's one of the few areas where you can really challenge the big ones, even though you're a DTC or a brand, because essentially it's so different, because you are not competing with a category page of 100 products. You're competing with your product against all of the other SKUs in one way or another. So that's how I would like approach that kind of situation, rather going for popular products and going for the layer above in terms of finding the traffic earlier in the buyer journey.
The product grid is like the free listings in
Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
form they come, whether it's popular
Yeah.
products or whatever it is, because they have different names depending on what the time you search.
What and where and how, but yeah,
Yeah,
I'm often
it's
calling it popular products because I think it's the most common way of
yeah.
presenting it. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's crazy. You have this massive thing with the image of a product page in your face, usually above everything else.
Yeah.
Like if you like you said you're working a lot on that now, like what are you doing to increase your chances of showing up there?
Yeah, so I've actually I was missing a lot of information about it. I think all credit to Brody Clark, and the guys that is actually working on these sectors. But I think too few people actually been researching it. So I've tried to do my best, kind of during 8-9 months or something like that, and trying to find both on the patent side, and I was actually running a study now before I went to the Baltic Nordic SEO Summit and presented it. And what I found in that study, based on like 5,800 keywords in Sweden and like 53,000 products, is that the biggest correlation that I found in that study that actually supported some of my ideas was that product reviews is the most kind of important aspect of showing up in these elements. So, and it's very interesting, but because people have been saying that reviews, the amount of reviews is the strongest correlating aspect of GBP rankings before Google My Business, Google Business, and we're now seeing in this kind of correlation study a similar thing also for popular products, where the amount of reviews looks like the most kind of correlating aspects of showing up. And we saw that like 78% of all products showing up actually have some kind of product reviews. So, and of course, like it's like popular products, so they should have some kind of aspects of being popular. And you can say like, yeah, they have reviews because they are popular. But if you think in that aspect as an SEO, you can also think like, how are we able to impact this aspect? What can we work with so we can approach it? And how does this kind of correlate with other things that is very on the topic right now, like virality, and other things like actually Chrome traffic, the nav boost signals, and all of these kind of aspects is something that I'm trying to kind of get some kind of grasp on also. But yeah, the strongest correlation without doubt was kind of the amount of reviews and the rating above somewhere like 4.3 up to 5. But we couldn't see like a rating of like 5.0 was better than 4.3. So you often get some like 1 or 2 in a normal setup. So having above 4 somewhere there, I think that's kind of a very interesting aspect to show up in those elements.
These things are so interesting because, like, for example, I've seen a brand that I work with is an electrical distributor. They have 150,000 products or something. That the names of the products are just nonsense letters because they are part numbers. Like it's whatever. And so those don't have reviews. Those don't have nothing, and they do show up in those things. And then on the other hand, you have this other situation where, for example, you see price is a massive factor. Like they're usually quite cheap options there and a few more expensive options. But it's interesting to see that you usually can't control price. You could work on the reviews, sort of have a great product and try to incentivize having, getting those reviews. Have you seen in that same study, did you see reviews might have been the strongest correlation? Did you see something else? Did you see backlinks? Did you see any other form of factor that you think could have made, could have helped?
Yeah, I had a strong idea also regarding price that you mentioned. And I was slightly shocked that I couldn't really see, because I was thinking the same thing, like in general, cheaper options because it's higher volume would be kind of correlating with that. And that would also support the case that, yeah, it's more people buying it because it's a cheaper product, it's a higher volume aspect. But I couldn't really find that strong correlation, to be honest. But if you think about it, within each grid, like the first positions within the grid normally had a cheaper price than the ones lower down. But if you just compare overall kind of rankings in correlation with price, I almost couldn't see it at all. It was a kind of small correlation. I think some things that we saw stronger correlation with, which also makes sense in one way, is kind of seller name in the title, which would make sense for like D2Cs. And that's kind of a hypothesis that I have also, because if you are the brand and people are searching, you're building up volume for brand plus product, because these elements are showing up. And in the patterns, there is a lot of indications that Google breaks this data down in terms of like brand, product line, and what they call attribute, which essentially is kind of, in this case, is actually the kind of product type. So if we think about like that, they aggregate on brand level, they aggregate on product line, and they aggregate on attribute. If you can connect any of these two and kind of generate volume based on it, that could increase your chances of actually also ranking. So it's almost kind of building historical data, but based on a topical cluster in popular products also. So it's so dependent on where the popular products is actually showing up. But we are seeing them showing up quite a lot on kind of brand or brand cat results and so on. And in those situations, you can really gather quite a lot of kind of historical data or volume that could indicate you're actually being a popular product in that segment.
It's really like, if you think, what signals would a popular product actually have, and you think from an engineering point of view how you would code that,
Yeah.
you could get to these same ideas without looking at anything. Yeah, it must have reviews. It's probably searched by name with the brand next to it, so you have this brand search sort of thing going on, and there all might be different signals that, and maybe that's why the cheap products that usually are from massive brands that are very well known and that people might search by name, that maybe that's where the price gets into it, like, because visually it just looks that there's a lot of cheap stuff and some more expensive stuff, but there's more cheap stuff than expensive things. But maybe that's because the expensive stuff usually is from niche brands that are not as well known as the major retailer that has these other things.
Yeah, it's kind of, even though I couldn't see like the kind of the price aspect, like in this data set, I was pulling kind of commercial keywords in general, of course, and the kind of the biggest sample of this in Sweden, the seller that came up most was IKEA. Not shocked for his maybe Swedish brand, but as you said, like cheap products in a category where you have a wide spread of kind of furniture, of course, like it's widespread of kind of the pricing. So essentially that still support the case of IKEA being the most shown in this segment. But like, it's very interesting because I think that essentially we need to start thinking about it in terms of showing up is the kind of the first step if we are D2C, and we need to think about it in terms of brand, product line, and attribute volumes, and then reviews and so on. But it's also kind of essentially fulfilling the data that we're able to fill in the Google Shopping Graph, because I think that's something I've been challenging SEOs on lately, is that like on the paid search side, people in our industry, they have been used to working with Google Shopping and all of the setups with the feeds and so on. But most SEOs, even in e-commerce SEO, has always kind of put it on the paid teams. And I think that's something we need to challenge a bit, because often the most important data that is sent to Google Shopping Graph is sent through these feeds. It's sent through APIs. And we sometimes don't even have kind of access to Merchant Center or seeing what data is shared, no matter if it's from a Shopify or for a custom platform. Like, we need to have the understanding. And often us as SEOs are more familiar with the kind of the technical structures of the site. And we know which kind of data we have somewhere in the CMS or PIM or whatever, because we are working on trying to improve the PDPs or the other parts of the site. So if we can bring this kind of insights, no matter if it's color or material and trying to fill the gaps in Google Shopping Graph, I think we also can be just shown for more opportunities. And especially since we are like, these elements are, I guess you've seen it a lot, but like are really pushing in the AI mode setups. We don't have that setup in Europe yet, but looking at AI mode in the US, it's kind of the only clickable elements are almost like shopping graph, free listing, popular products elements, or maybe some cited links. But it's like, I would say 95% of the click areas are connected only to kind of the free listing Google Shopping Graph aspects. So need to get
Merchant
ready.
Center. Merchant Center is a thing that not enough people get into. Like, it baffles me to sometimes I get a client, I request access, and it's like the previous guy has never asked for this. This is good for me. Like,
yeah, it's an
it's good.
opportunity.
Yeah,
I think like people that is not working e-commerce SEO, sometimes doesn't know what it is at all. So it's also very specific for the kind of e-com SEO side of the industry.
but it's such a big thing in your, like, it's the most clickable element of the search result
Yeah,
in commercial queries are the free
absolutely.
listings, however they are called. When on the more normal side of e-commerce SEO, what you would do is you would maybe have really good schema on product pages and touch on all those attributes. And because they are connected and Google does get, like, Merchant Center does get information from crawling your pages, and it fills in attributes that maybe you didn't provide directly. It sort of does something like that, or discovers additional products that you didn't provide. Like it tries to get as much information as you can. Um, Besides working on having the most complete descriptive product page that you can, um, are you doing anything like, what are you making sure, you sort of touched on it before, but what are you doing to make sure that feed is as complete as possible?
Is often I will go back and say like the challenge is often what kind of information do the client actually have? Because once again, it's back to a D2C. You should have all the potential
Let's say it's your
opportunities.
brand. Let's say it's your
Yeah,
brand. You just sell on your website. You direct
yeah,
to consumer. You may have wholesale, but you don't distribute your products on other online stores. So you have
yeah,
full control.
yeah,
What?
yeah. No, but for like essentially, what you need to think about in terms of this data, as you mentioned, like I would say that the primary source is somehow maybe like the feed and the API. Some people say it's actually the page, and I would say it doesn't matter which way you're looking at it, no matter what kind of, you know that if you send a feed, they will update at least once a day with all the information, and that's important to have in mind. Like you can at least push kind of data into updates. If you don't have a crawl frequency daily on all PDPs, you can push it to Google Shopping Graph at large scale, like once a day with the feed, or if you have an APIs more often. So, and then you have some kind of set aspects of it, which I mentioned, like you have certain attributes where Google is actually right now also opening up more and more that should, according to them, support the kind of new AI reality. So they've been talking about, like, for now you have maybe, what can it be, like color, material, sizing, these kind of aspects that you can fulfill. And if you are the brand, you should be able to fulfill it, and you should populate it on the PDPs, you should populate it in the feeds. So think about it more like, okay, where do we aggregate the kind of product knowledge? Yeah, on the PDP, in the feed, in the right formats. Like it's basically feeling that is, yeah, but most people don't do it. And by doing that, you often enrich both the page and the feed more than the competitor or the reseller can do anyhow. Because if you're the brand, you will always be one step ahead, and you will be the first source that is sharing this information. Call it information gain, call it whatever you want, but like you will be the first that tells something about this product that no one else knows before. So that's how I'm seeing, like, okay, start with how can we enrich the information on the PDP, and essentially what we were talking about before, when you're adding like new elements and so on, maybe FAQs, maybe kind of other elements on the page, have in mind also how you want to be able to show them to Google in the Google Shopping Graph, because essentially you have some set attributes, as I was saying, but you also have a free form attribute called description. And that's essentially where you share all unstructured data, which normally is a kind of a product description, of course, but you can also send in FAQs, or if it's some kind of sizing guide important or something else, as long as you keep, I don't remember the exact characters, but it's some kind of character limit. But you can share quite a lot of information, and essentially this could also create potential in how Google handles the products in terms of which attributes they are able to connect you to, and so on, because you can mention a lot of things in those kind of elements, yeah, that you always share on the page and in the feeds.
In your time just looking into this, are you are you sort of maybe optimizing or changing product titles? Because sometimes brands for example, a brand wouldn't have necessarily, sometimes they will, but not always, especially medium to smaller brands, they wouldn't have their brand name in front of the product. They would have a made up name, like a fantasy name that they put the product, and then sort of what the product is. And maybe then the color, depending if it's a variation for a URL or if it's a single thing. But would you be trying to further optimize the titles that are within Merchant Center, so they follow a certain specific structure that may be different from what is presented on the page? Like, would you be doing that?
Yeah, I think most SEO needs to understand, as just as you say, like in most cases, no matter which platform you're talking about, they're like generally taking the product name and sending it off. And as you said, sometimes we have been working on meta titles or title objects, and you can kind of, even though you are not copying that instead, at least you can learn what kind of information you actually added to the title on the PDP to find attributes of things that you actually semantically connected to the product because you generated traffic volume. If you're able to also send it through in the product name in Google Shopping Graph, that's of course an opportunity. But one thing, as you said, like in most D2C cases, we have to add the brand in the either kind of the feeds on the feed side, or as a rule in Merchant Center before it's sent to the shopping graph, because most brands for some reason doesn't want to mention the brand on every PDP, and we can't really like sometimes attack it and say like it would make sense, because I understand from other perspectives that you maybe just want the series and the product category or the product line or whatever it can be instead there, and then you need to add it maybe first, or in some kind of rule-based system, actually adding the brand to the product title. So yeah, it's pretty common, I would say.
Have you seen if, like, I have a friend that has a Google Ads agency, and he has this thing where he automatically updates those titles in the feed,
Yeah.
trying to follow some sort of I don't know exactly what his trigger is, but he's sort of tweaking them to see what does better. So you have the product page on the website that has one name, and then you have an optimized name on the feed that is also getting updated. Have you seen if that? I'm not sure if the constant tweaking of the title would be beneficial for the free listing visibility. Maybe for paid stuff it is, but
I think that this is one of the challenges, because essentially what you're saying is that someone else is changing it and you have no clue that they are doing that, and that's the most kind of common situation. So by just utilizing some kind of momentum logic, I haven't seen like tweaking if it's beneficial or not, but the thing that I've been seeing is that they often update it quite a lot on different, both from my team where we have people, but also when you're working with other sides. So that's more like, okay, get an understanding and impact what you want to see in it, and try to keep it consistent. Like having a naming convention, this is how we build it. And of course, then you can challenge it on both channels instead. Like, okay, let's try this version instead, because they're going to make it possible now to A/B test in Merchant Center the titles, for example. Before, you have only been able to do it kind of outside of Merchant Center with kind of complex setups. But going further now, they are opening up some kind of opportunities to A/B test it within, and then you can do it, because essentially, like all titles, it's CTR. It's a lot of different aspects that you can impact, essentially, both on the paid and organic side. And if you're able to find correlating data that's actually supporting that you're driving more traffic, for sure it could be valuable. But I think it's kind of, yeah, pretty late stage operations in most cases.
Yeah. Would you recommend what title format would you do? Would you do like brand, product range, main attribute? Like, do you have
like
a format that you like?
Based on the patterns, it looks like brand, product line, and product category, or product, like the actual product. And then it's like I've always been saying, as you said, like color or size and so on. The interesting part, which we don't really understand, is that having color or size in the title is actually correlating with where it's positioned in popular products in the study material. But I have no understanding why, and it's something I've been recommending also. So it's still something we are trying to look into in more depth. But it's very interesting that we saw that, and there could be one hypothesis. I don't have it set now, but one hypothesis could be that in those cases you're actually often separating it based on different SKUs, and maybe sometimes it's all based on GTINs. So you're actually maybe separating the product sometimes on different sizing, and of course you're generating less reviews, less volume for each and every of the sizes. So by that, it could be a hypothesis that is actually based on aggregating less data for each product when you have a color or a size. Well, we can't really support it 100% yet, so I wouldn't say it's the case, but it could be one hypothesis.
Yeah, because imagine, like, if there is clearly search demand for a certain color of a certain product, you sort of want to take that benefit and maybe have a dedicated URL that is for that product instead of a variant URL that's going to have a canonical tag or whatever. There is an advantage to that, but maybe what you lose on the generic term, you win it in the specific color query. Maybe in that popular product grid, you show up more because you have the color there.
And I
but
think
maybe
so
that is at
on
the expense of losing maybe the general term.
Yeah, I think it's probably so dependent once again on segments, because in fashion and different segments you maybe really want to, but like this is only looking at it in the title, and as we said, like you still have that specific color element and you still have that specific size element in the shopping graph. So this is only looking if it's in the title or not, and if they already have the information in the element, maybe they don't see it as necessary to actually have it in the product title as well, because you have an image and you have an element saying that it's green, so you see that it's a green product and it's actually already filled in as green. Okay, then you have a green dress here. It doesn't make sense that you have it in the title as well.
This is this is the thing that I think as SEOs we know the least about how how those free listings work, because maybe it's just throwing off a system and it's just adding this word that is taking away relevancy from maybe the main entity or however you want to call it. We're not really sure how that sort of works. To add one thing on free listings that people might not know, and that adds to maybe the value of becoming a topical authority or just dominating a certain part of queries, is when I have this client, I've had it for a while, and they are retailers, so they sell other people's brands. They don't have their own brand, but there's a product line that we sell that we rank above the brand itself. So it's sort of like we are the topical authority for that product and that brand, not we're above the brand itself. And all our products from that brand, they rank, number one for the main name of the product and all that. We also rank pretty well for the brand name itself, with that is not the product name. But we dominate the popular products. We dominate the listings. And that seems to be out of just being the representative source. Like if you could put that concept to the product level, it seems to be coming from there, because I can't see really why it would be any other way. Although I did send as a test a while ago, like a press release to the product. That did something. But
I can actually take that one also, because that's something I didn't believe I would find kind of in the research and some papers, but like that Google Shopping Graph is actually aggregating kind of more information, especially when you're launching a new product. They are clearly stating in those patents that they're aggregating more kind of information from external sources to be able to see which products they should probably be testing in the search in the popular products elements and so on. And like I have probably underestimated the aspect of actually having digital PR for a product launch, or like that you might do for other purposes like Reddit or whatever it can be, like playing with those aspects because you're doing it for other purposes. But if you're thinking about it, it probably correlates even maybe sometimes stronger with the shopping graph aspects, because you can even see it on these product cards that they sometimes attach kind of yeah, people are talking about the products, or like the review information, of course, but like also from external sources, not only from like the review sector of Google and so on. So I think that's also something interesting to connect it to. And I think you talked a bit with Pavel about it. Sorry for connecting to that again, but because I think it's so interesting that when you mentioned it in that podcast, you talked about like ecom is not getting hit as often and so on. And I've seen the exact same thing. Like, and I think it's actually Google Shopping Graph sometimes like supporting that aspect, because if you can prove with these kind of aspects that you are really classified for 100% as an ecom, and you are somehow competing for these aspects, actually selling products, I think there's no reason for like, yeah, messing with you in those situations.
Yeah, one of maybe the things that cemented that argument in my head, not only looking at what I saw just live on the internet, but like this client with 150,000 products that have basically no search volume at all, because there are you have a machine, and the machine has many parts. They sell each individual part. What search volume is that going to have? So, and they have any other website that has those amount of pages for that amount of demand would be considered like the most spammy, unuseful thing that is only wasting energy and resources. But it's not.
Not
Like,
exactly. And
yeah,
somehow there is some kind of demand somewhere. That's even though it's
yeah,
low.
no, it's crazy. Yeah, and just while you were while you were answering what I said before, I was also thinking, well, having people search maybe the historical data on your URL that has good rankings is also a measure of popularity. Maybe the product having backlinks is also a measure of popularity. Maybe the product being mentioned across the internet is also a measure of popularity that goes into what gets chosen as popular products. And you can work on those things even if you are not the manufacturer of the product, but you sell it. Like
Exactly.
if you manage to build up your URL as the popular one, or make it more popular, maybe you can get into those searches. I haven't thought about the popularity from that point of view. Like it's such a good point.
Yeah, I haven't really found anything correlating with links, but it's always hard with links and mentioned because they are going hand in hand, because after you will never get any of those two separately normally. So but absolutely the kind of dimension aspects, and especially like uh, everything in terms of like, if we're talking about it is in terms of opinions and so on, I think it's extremely valuable. If we've been talking a lot, Google try to shift into that, and that's why it's so important to get this kind of product reviews in place on the PDPs to kind of get the opinions of people and finding good ways of handling it also on the PDP, but having it both internally and externally, that's how I would say kind of filling that aspects of yeah of that perspective that Google really wants to see. Um, but yeah, so I think it's super interesting to see, and I agree with you, because like how strongly this kind of virality aspects actually, yeah, Chrome Chrome volume is right now. I would guess that that's probably a big part. And we also saw some kind of, someone shared about this Chrome shopping classifier. People are discussing quite a lot now last couple of days here how it's used, if it's only used for some purposes in Chrome, or if they actually could benefit from it in these kind of elements as well, actually classifying the product within the like first 450 characters, which essentially is the central annotation in Chorus or other frameworks as well. So working with the most prominent information first, and with that, like I haven't been working so much with kind of visual semantics on the PDPs, more than kind of making good UX aspects and prioritizing important information. But like I think we can all learn more about those aspects and see how we can work on those on the PDPs. And everything, as always, is connecting to each other, because if we are prioritizing or highlighting information in the central annotation, yeah, of course it's more valuable for Google in the first information that they get from the page, and they were able to crawl more and focus more on it if they can find potential. So yeah.
Feel that the shopping classifier, it's quite new, so I don't know a lot about it, but what the concept that I understand, I think that brands that are a real business and that they are running ads, they do not have really bad product pages. Like they have the key things in that above the fold area. They have the image that they require, they have a title, they have the variations, they have shopping conditions, they have add to cart, they have buy. No one has like a crazy design where you have to scroll to the bottom of a page, who knows where, to sort of add to cart or buy. I think that is going to somewhat be taken care of automatically by any product page template. Maybe there's micro optimizations that you can do, but I don't think we're going to have to spend too much effort there, because they're all like, there's a good base. There should be a good base.
Yeah, and I think like being able also, as we said, like sending data to a Google Shopping Graph, essentially that's classifying you no matter what as well, because you're actually saying that this is a product URL. If Google's not accepting it, they are actually declining the product anyhow. So it's kind of two ways of seeing it. So
Yeah. Yeah, like that. I think they're making big of a. I think that there's many things that you will need to take care of, but I have a feeling that that is already taken care of if you have Merchant Center, if you have something on, like, and if you have just a normal design, not something completely strange that a website design agency would have, but for their own website that they're all crazy. But if it's a normal ecom product page template, I think you should be all right.
I think so as well.
How do you create topical maps for e-commerce stores? And I want to add a little bit of nuance to this question, because the collection pages that you build and the product pages that the brand has to, like, you don't choose the products the brand has to offer. That's a constraint that we have. It's not like articles, right? Like, we have that constraint. And that somewhat constrains the collection or category pages that you can build, because they have to somewhat make sense with what the brand is trying to sell. So there is some boundaries already set up for us by the brand that we're working with. How do you, maybe you could talk about an example that you did recently that you really liked. How does this collection page topical map looks like meaning the collection pages that you're building and then the supporting content that you're going to go and build? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so like for me, it's very often, as you also once again talked about with Pavel. I think the challenge is that we are rarely coming in and building it from scratch. So we need to handle the current situation, and to be totally honest, like the most challenging part is often to find a central entity in most cases, especially if it's kind of a, how would you say it, like if it's a multi-brand in a lot of different sectors, or like those those are almost like, okay, this I actually recommended some brands even to chop it up into multiple domains. So if we start there, like even we maybe can't change the product sometimes, but if you really want to do a good SEO play and you have too wide sector of products, I think you can be struggling if you're going for like classic pretty like cheap products from China or whatever. You will be struggling to cover it all. So starting there, either chop it up in subdomains maybe, but I would go for domains, just separate it there. So that's kind of one thing of one perspective of it, and looking at, okay, how do I find the central entity for a segment of products, and then as in all kind of topical map building, like in my case for ecom, I always try to see the kind of, yeah, the commercial side of it as my priority. So no matter if I know there is a lot of kind of filling gaps normally in a topical map on the information side, I maybe sometimes, depending on the case, but sometimes often I actually continue to start with that central entity, and I go with, of course, like the category build out in terms of, we talked about fashion before. You need to, they maybe have for dresses, you need to build it out on attributes, which is colors, which is sizing, which is material. You need to start there somewhere to be able to cover the commercial side of the topical cluster, because that's essentially what is driving the value for us, no matter if we want to fill the full grasp the full kind of point of everything. I've been struggling in ecom to do the opposite. I've tried sometimes to, let's say, go for a certain kind of subcategory and then approach both kind of the semantic content network in terms of essentially going for a category page, subcategory pages, and then connect it with articles. But in most cases, I actually see a kind of the approach of approaching still the kind of historical or like the SEO that you would have done before, always like building out the categories, because that's still the commercial side of that topical map, and then continue to support it with the priority clusters in terms of the products that you as a brand are most familiar, most known for, or that's most important in terms of your business perspectives, and then try to connect all of those aspects and link those to categories and PDPs. So that's essentially how I'm normally approaching it, and that's kind of not the most kind of topical map structured way always, but I think it's because it's in the end we often want to see kind of quick results, and when we have that kind of situation where we need to approach it from a business perspective, which we very often need to do, we need to start with the commercial side, and that's how I'm building it up often.
Yeah, that's it. I would say I have the same idea, because what I did was grab the concepts, not necessarily the execution advice, like you build all of this stuff. I just grabbed the concepts of what are you trying to do, and then try to apply that to ecom. And for example, if someone sells saunas, and if you have different types of saunas, right? Let's say you're a brand, you have like maybe 30 types of saunas. They're for different people, sizes of people, because they fit 2, 1, 3, 4. And then you have different types of saunas, like the technology. Is it a traditional sauna? Is it an infrared sauna? Things like that. Like, yeah, you have your product that is called the Alex infrared 2-person sauna, whatever, however you want to call that thing. There is still so much value if you have more than one in being aggressive and just creating those collection pages that target all the different ways that people will search for these products. Like some people search for only size, not heating technology. Some people search only by heating technology. Some people search by size and heating technology. So you need to figure out the combinations of pages that sort of represent the products you have in every way people would search for them. And the tricky part is to determine if you should create a dedicated page for them, or if you're attacking that part as a heading on a more general page.
Yeah, and I often go by, because like often like look at the kind of the segment and see if it's in general possible to open up an index. If we can see any indications of there being an index for those kind of attributes, then I'm opening it up. And sometimes it's the challenge is when there is for like 3 out of 6 technologies, you often open up all 6, and then you sometimes need to back off, because essentially it's just disturbing, kind of creating some kind of internal competition, or disturbing the ranks of the main category or main collection, because Google is essentially seeing that as something that should cover it all. But I rather open it up in those cases and then realizing that than just in general. Like, yeah, of course you can do it technology by technology, but as we said, like if it's 6 technologies, fine. But if you're looking at it from 16,000 or whatever it can be based on scope, you need to say, okay, we always go by color, or we always go by size, because in fashion we know that color in general works. So that's how I'm normally approaching it, and deciding on materials or deciding on colors, and then we're trying to build up a faceted logic for that, essentially, as the kind of the first step and the first approach in most situations. Because I'm still shocked that people are not doing this, and like, yeah, it's basic SEO, but still kind of extremely valuable in most cases. And the kind of hybrid of having this to be able to get the regular results and pushing popular products, that's essentially an e-com SERP today. Those 2 elements in those segments, that's it. You generally don't see anything else. Sometimes a PDP, but it's kind of collections and popular products. That's what we need to go for in most cases.
Yeah. I do say that I do use search volume estimations to have somewhat an idea of what seems to be more popular than something else, to try to figure out when I'm creating these pages if it's like it is
But
one factor that I look at for sure.
Yeah, but it's also kind of, I'm normally using it in kind of n-gram logics, because if we are looking at it in terms of like, okay, what attributes are we actually going for? And we see, as I said, like, okay, there's volume for red, white, and black connection to some type of dress. Yeah, of course, then we can open up that, because we know it's volume, some kind of demand, and we know that there is actually an index.
Yeah.
Okay, there's both business value and search demand in those cases. So of course you can use it in that kind of, but I think you shouldn't get stuck in like, okay, this is the keyword I'm going for, but I'm going for that attribute or that entity, and based on that, then I'm able to say that, okay, it's not one keyword, it's going to collect this type of historical data based on my hypothesis that we at least have some volume connected to it. So I think it's more like that I'm approaching it, essentially.
Yeah, I was telling this to Luis like a while ago when we were recording that podcast is I do like do like the traditional keyword research for the type of product, grab those keywords, do a SERP based clustering. So seeing if the same keyword, if 2 keywords share many results, and it sort of, they mean the same thing because they share the same index, they share the same results. And I do use that as a way of first clustering keywords, because I know I'm not targeting just one thing. There could be 20 keywords, 100 keywords, 50 keywords, whatever it is, that they all mean the same thing. And that gives me a better idea of what has different indices very quickly, and maybe an estimation of total demand. And from that's when you go and manually review and see things. Now, there is a bias if you start from there instead of maybe thinking it out, but sometimes that's a pretty quick way of having some knowledge on a niche that you had no idea about.
Exactly, and that's exactly why I'm normally kind of using it, but running it both kind of from Search Console, running kind of n-grams, and but also reverse engineering in terms of keyword volumes on n-gram basis, because of course you know that you are missing things, but you often kind of see patterns. Because the problem with having a kind of a list of 1,000 clustered keywords is that it's hard for you to see that kind of aspect. But if you see that, yeah, white is coming up in 200 cases, then you know that color is an aspect that you should have in mind. Or if some kind of material is coming up, as I said, or some kind of usage where you're using it, or some kind of audience, or some kind, because if these types of things is coming up, then at least you need to know, that you need to connect it somewhere. And if that's on kind of the category page, or if it's on an article or PDP, that's kind of a later stage, but at least trying to localize all of these essentially attributes once again.
Let's say now we have an idea of the collection or category page that we're creating. How does that category page look for you? Like what do you usually like to see when you finished working with a category page? Like usually how does it look like?
Yeah, I would say that I'm more and more going into maybe a collection category page. I would say H1 with product type, of course, or product category name, and short description, maybe somewhere like defining. In most situations, you end up with kind of defining or definition in combination with kind of either the most important attributes somewhere, like what you should have in mind when buying it. That's essentially where I'm often ending up. In most situations, you are then stuck with the product grid, and I've been leaning in a direction to try to kind of, often before, I think we had too few products on the kind of the main category page, or like the first category page. So I'm heading in direction to actually showing more products, and if it's possible, in some cases, like breaking it down into verticals. It's so dependent on situation, but if you're stuck in some template, yeah, it's just a product grid, and often kind of going for an kind of FAQ section or something like that. Sometimes a bit more kind of long format. It's also kind of a bit based on what kind of what kind of information that would actually be beneficial. But in most cases, I would say like short description, product grid, and then kind of FAQs. That's kind of my general setup in those situations. What do you see as most beneficial for you?
Similar, so H1, breadcrumbs.
Yeah, of course.
2 lines of product description, short description. That sort of is quite descriptive of it's. If you just read that without more information, it tells you the range of products that are on the page, the main attributes, and it has value propositions for the customer. So it clearly defines for what type of customer it is, and the use case, the main use case that the brand imagines. So and brands, depending on what they sell, like for example, fashion brands, they like beautiful language, not like, so you got to allow some room there for the brand to do its thing. But if I have some attributes there that are the most important ones, and I have, the best way to describe it is like the main keyword that sort of describes the whole thing. Like I think that description is playing its role. Then depending on the type of collection page it is or category page, I might have internal links to subcategories as elements. because that is so helpful for the user to quickly find the type of products they are looking for instead of having to mess around with a bunch of products or filtering down stuff on the side. So I do like, and that is a great way of just dealing with your internal linking to the other categories.
Agree.
I make sure that the sorting filters are all sort of on-click events, so Google is not getting in them and getting trapped. The products, hopefully, the product grid, I like to have the products with the most amount of reviews to the top that are usually the best sellers. So sometimes they're not, but usually they are. So front load those because they would most likely satisfy user intent quicker than the other ones.
Yeah.
Then I
think
spread the other ones.
that's a mistake. Sorry for jumping in, but that's a mistake that a lot of ecom still do. That not sorting by some kind of popularity, just sorting by latest, and that's when you can see like page 2 ranking sometimes and so on, because the most important products are on page 2 or page 3. Sorry for jumping in, but it's so common.
Yeah, you have this product with 100 reviews and it's at the bottom of the product grid or on page 2. You're like, why are you doing that? Like, man.
You don't want to sell.
Yeah, man, that's product grid done. And then what I try to imagine is if this was a physical store and like this category page was the physical store and a customer would go in, what are all the possible questions they could ask if they wanted to buy? So it's usually about why they would choose one product over the other. These are products that are featured on the product grid. And I just use the ones on page 1 of the product grid. I don't care about the other ones. So there's at least, let's say, 8 products there, because sometimes I like more. Maybe it's 32, maybe it's 8. It really depends. But I try to, there might be, because maybe they all have one attribute in common, but they have other things that are different to each one of them. Maybe they have just the fabric in common, but they have different colors. Or maybe they have, let's say, if it's fashion, maybe they have different lengths. And which, because size is one thing, but length makes it a completely different product. It's a t-shirt or a long sleeve or whatever. So I try to talk about the use cases for each of the products that could be used and which one would you buy in which cases and things like that. So it's always has this intent.
Yeah, I agree.
If I have some styling information, which is sort of how you would say the use cases, it's always around, because these products, I'm talking about this because you might want to know this to know what you want to buy. It's always related to that. And then I sort of finish off with just pure buying conditions. So we offer free shipping or we offer whatever, and just reinforce the sort of the buying propositions that the brand has. And I think that's pretty much it. Well, filtering should be somewhat reasonable. You should be able to filter out those products quickly. Also, if you're not doing an advanced faceted navigation with that, those filters also should be on click, so Google isn't getting in that at all. And then I have FAQs for specific things that are maybe where I'm expanding more on things that I'm not sure I want to put just purely in the face of the customer. Just so I don't have a massive page. It's a little bit compact.
I think it's always a balance. It's easy in theory to go too long, but it's also about prioritizing the most important and essential kind of. Yeah. So it's always a balance. It's not length that is creating the results all the time. It's actually value. So
yeah. And there is one sneaky thing that I sometimes do in cases where it's just this comes from the old SEO playbook and it still works really well. And it's when you have a brand that has not a lot of products and you are going up against massive brands, you have 5 or 8 or 10 of these, but they are the most important product line that the business has. They just are a smaller brand, and that's what they have. And you're going up against massive stores that have 100 of them. There still is like a relevancy issue where those brands have that type of product mentioned so many times on the page. It's still baked somewhere in the thing. So you do need to have a section that is not pretty, but that somewhat increases keyword density if you think about it that way. And I know it works because I've beaten these brands maybe 5 to 8 times in completely different niches and things in those situations, and it's still a thing. And it's something that just takes advantage of a part of the algorithm that still thinks that the other page is more about this subject just because it's mentioned so many times. It's like there is a range that's acceptable, and because you're so small, you're out of it, and you sort of just need to get in there.
I think like kind of the correlation that I've been seeing sometimes, maybe it's the same that you're after, is kind of just having like, even though you're building out a category or a collection with like 2-3 products, essentially I could also see that it could be kind of a nav boost effect sometimes, because if you only have 2 products, you will see more people bounce, and you can see some kind of other things that is actually impacting that correlates 100% with what you're saying also. No, but yeah, of course it's kind of mentioning the entity of for sure, but it could be a lot of different things. I've also seen a kind of strong correlation if you have a lot of products which is out of stock, that the position is dropping, which most people probably have seen on collections also. And these kind of things. What you can do is, of course, like going to stuff like pre-order and playing around with the kind of in-stock statuses and so on. So that could be something to have in mind. Something you can also do in those situations, which I thought you were going for, but it's kind of, if you have very few products on a collection page, but it's super important, you can start working with bundling. And actually creating new SKUs, which I know I've done and quite a lot of people have done also, where you maybe end up with, you're going from like 3-4 products, ending up with bundling it one, and then you have like 3 and 5 and 10, dependent on the buy-in patterns, of course. But that's kind of a way of handling it also, in breaking it down into multiple SKUs.
Yeah, and also this is where, going back to what we were talking about before, like when you separate product URLs by color, if they're search demand, it's also helpful because now you have all the versions of the color for that thing. And you can have a unified, if you want, you can have a unified product page for the user, but being able to spread the variations out also
I've done
helps
it
with
in
that.
quite a lot of situations, also breaking down the colors, or yeah, even you have sometimes you have junior, senior, and so on, and you're breaking that down in multiple visuals on the page, and so yeah, I think it's kind of
It's just when product coverage, if that's something that we could think about, a word that describes this situation, sometimes you need a way around it, and this is a way to do it. And it only works, or let's say it only sticks in time. It only works over time if your products have a good user experience. Like if the user signals have to be good once you get the benefit of the doubt from the algorithm, the user experience needs to follow. Like they have to have a good experience, meaning your products are really relevant and what people expect to see. If that fails, then this trick of getting you in the game, it really doesn't work. It falls on its face. And that's why when I do it, I only do it when I have no other choice, and when I know this product is actually quite good. Like it seems objectively
exactly, and it's
good.
essentially, it's like, you have product market fit and it works in other scenarios and it's important for the business, but you need a way to work around to be able to rank with that collection in those scenarios. And yeah, I think for the colors, it's just beneficial for the client, no matter if it's going to the same URL or the customer, but like yeah, it's both beneficial for the client and the customer in the end. So it's actually a better visual experience. But like something to connect this to, you were into kind of the filter trap, which I think that, like, looking at Corey's framework and looking at it in terms of cost of retrieval, that aspect, which is challenging in most cases when when you are stuck on platforms like Shopify and so on sometimes, because you have their setup in the foundation that you need to work on, but like being able to at least clean all of these easy things like not having crawlable filters, but also basic Shopify setup with like linking to this category collection plus PDP URLs with like canonical back. Those are like simple cost of retrieval wins, but it's also something that one's always see still, and I am still kind of concerned that people are not solving it all the time in new templates, themes, whatever it is. So there is like ecom is so much about trying to find Google's crawler trap and remove as many of them as possible, and especially when you're working with like custom builds, that's kind of the biggest challenge often for me. So I have some clients who own custom builds, and you always find new crawler traps because they're building some new function or whatever it can be. And it's trying to just cover those as soon as possible.
Yeah. We didn't mention, just on the technical side, crawling traps is one of the big ones. And then you also want the most important content, whether that's the H1, the title, these descriptions that we talked about, the links to the products. You need those things. They can't require JavaScript. They have to come in the raw HTML. That makes a massive difference. You can, maybe the images don't show up, fine, but you need to have those URLs loading.
You need the kind of the crawling, hopefully as much as possible, server-side rendered and server-side cached, but like essentially at least kind of the navigations and so on. 100% agree. And like the kind of, hopefully we're going towards something with the help of AI crawlers that people are going less and less for headless, but like headless builds without server-side rendering, that's still messy with having so much client-side rendering on ecom because people want nice visuals. It's a struggle. And sometimes it's like, you just need to find a solution, doing it partially or whatever. So but it's extremely important to have in mind with these headless builds.
This is more important when you have these massive websites with hundred thousands of products, because just having proper internal linking and just the basics there, like that's just so important. Like people don't understand how much of a difference it makes if the site is properly connected and it's very clear what each product is and what each category is and what relationships they have between another. Because there you're not usually going too heavy on this content thing because you can't. It's just too much. You got to be very careful.
It's more kind
the
of
other part,
architecture, infrastructure, and that's kind of what I'm often talking about with ecom, that is so different because it's essentially you have all of the pieces in the puzzle, or in those scenarios you just need to find a way of structuring and prioritizing it. And that's essentially navigation. It's essentially kind of building logic of facilitating categories, collections, whatever, and in the end getting the right data on templates set up, because that's what you can do to scale it.
Yeah, you touched on navigation. How are you handling that? Do you prefer many pages on navigation, or do you prefer to link out to maybe the core product ranges, and then within that page, that's where it gets funneled out to all the rest? How are you approaching that?
So
Like as a preference, because it will depend on the case, but as a preference.
But as a preference, I'm not a big fan of the super mega menus. So normally I'm trying to prioritize in some way or form. It's not always easy with the clients. to understand that you shouldn't show everything, but essentially having some kind of mega menu logic, but deciding what's in it. That's essentially, so as I said, so dependent on the case, how many links you end up with. But often when you come into a case, you maybe have like 300-400 if they have a super mega menu and you need to cut it. And some scenarios you come in and they have 5 and you can benefit from adding the most important popular categories and you end up on 15-20. So somewhere around that, I think, where I'm leaning, like dependent on the case. But yeah, I'm often moving towards middle, dependent on either they don't have some, they only have like 3 main categories, or they have a super mega menu, and often you want some kind of hybrid of it and prioritize, yeah, the most important for the business, of course.
I think I find myself doing the same thing, moving towards the middle. I like that way of actually explaining it. When you encounter a website, we have maybe many tools to sort of work on it, in the sense, not software tools I mean, but we can go hard on the maybe semantic network, or we can focus on microsemantics, or we can focus on distributional semantics, or we can attack a weak competitor by going where they are weak, or we can do, I don't know, just for the core thing right away. Like, when you encounter a website, do you have a decision-making process, or how do you think about how are you going to approach this website?
Yeah, so as a logic, I'm always going, as I mentioned slightly before, but like you need to start from the business perspective, and kind of often we come in with some kind of insights on where we're actually earning the most profit and the most money, and essentially turning that into Chorus framework. That's the central that's kind of the context that we are in. Okay, we're on this entity and our primary focus is actually this section, and with that in mind, you of course need to start looking into what do the competitors do based on this core segment of the site, or based on this entity. And when you're doing that, you're coming into things like momentum, you're coming into their content depth, you're coming into all of these aspects, because that's how you're going to challenge that competitor that you think is the possible to beat. And so dependent on your situation, if you're coming in as a market leader, want to gain more, or if you're a new site, of course you need to approach it from very different perspectives. But essentially that's what I'm searching for, I'm searching for our business perspective and the competitors in that sector, and often kind of their weaknesses. Like sometimes I'm finding that our competitive advantage would be on most the cost of retrieval side, because we maybe have a stronger technical side than they have, because we have a custom build, we can do whatever we want. Or sometimes you might end up on the other side, like, okay, they are very weak on the content side. Okay, here we need to do more of a content network and approach it from that. So I think just finding the weak spot of the competitor, that's essentially in the core segment. That's what I'm doing in general.
When you are looking at competitors, because what happens in e-commerce, again, and maybe another specific thing about e-commerce, is depending on who you're working with, you don't have a one-to-one competitor, because they don't sell the same type of products. They might have a part of their website is competing with you, and another one you don't have. Maybe you have different parts than them. Are you trying to look at like this competitor research at a topic level, or like how are you trying to navigate that?
I think you need to look at it from both perspectives, because, like, of course, kind of what I want to achieve is to beat them on this section, but as we know, the situation is still kind of site quality on domain level is so effectful today. So like you can't say that I'm going to beat them here if you're lagging too much on all of your other pages on the site. Even though you can create momentum here, it's super hard if you have so much problem somewhere else. So often, like, okay, we can see that this competitor they are strong in this sector, but they have these problems. And if we can solve these problems across the site, then we can achieve, let's say, cost of retrieval, or a kind of a template change, which would be beneficial for all PDPs, but also this sector. So, or a category template or whatever it can be. So it's in essentially, often you need to approach it from that segment, but then go upwards on both domains to be able to find the right approach. I think that's how I'm generally doing it.
I wanted to go back to a question that we sort of left sort of halfway. That was when we were talking about creating a topical map for an e-commerce store. We said we have product constraints that are the products that the store sells. There's usually not a lot we can do to change that, which also somewhat constrains the collection or category pages that we can create. We've sort of done that. When we go more into, you would say, information articles, like you've mentioned, you start with, usually try to start with the commercial side of the website. What I'm doing is sort of trying to start first with all the topics that, or they compare the different products that I have, like versus type keywords or alternative stuff, like that type of content, because I can lean into the attributes that are important, but I can also help inform a buying decision. And that's sort of why I see myself going to that area. But I'm curious how do you do it, and if you do something differently?
I haven't worked that much with kind of the versus side. I would say haven't seen it as much in Europe in general, to be honest, as a kind of approach. I'm not 100% sure if it's sometimes due to legal aspects that it could be the scenario. But I'm not 100% about that, but I haven't seen it as much as a strategy. I wouldn't say it doesn't work, but what I'm often ending up with is rather kind of best of or comparison, which we have been approaching quite a lot in listicle formats rather, because that's essentially how we can take that kind of behavior, the comparison intent. Even though we're not going for the versus, we can at least go for the comparison. And like we have been taking a lot of traffic from affiliates in general, and that's often pretty valuable traffic that we can gather directly. What we've been seeing lately is sometimes Google is shifting, and like it's aggregating so much historical data, these pages, that is taking over from the collection page. So we have been forced to migrate it into it. So like if you're looking at, that's essentially the kind of the things that we have been opening up quite a bit on, kind of, it's kind of informational, but still comparison, regular listicles comparison pages, like, but for our products, because it might make sense that we compare our best of something. So
that when I said versus, I was sort of referring to that. Like if you go back to that sauna example, it would be an article where we talk about infrared sauna versus traditional sauna, and we're just sort of comparing the products. Like if we created two collection or category pages that have different intent enough, it might make sense to compare them in that way, in a dedicated article. Like that's like there's a different part that is when you're going maybe comparing
brand versus brand, which is very common, like SaaS. That's I haven't seen it as much in ecom, at least in Europe here, where we're mainly based. But like, I think it could be interesting in some cases. But absolutely on the versus side, in terms of comparing different product types and so on, that could absolutely be. But often that's more of a kind of a bridge that if we're looking at kind of covering an entity, that's often my bridge to maybe a second entity. If we see them often as separate entities, like different types of saunas, or it could be just an attribute also. But like taking that core section, and when I want to bridge to the second one, I will take that as an opportunity to go into a second one.
Yeah. When I'm writing this content for collection pages, I usually like, if I don't have the internal links at the top, and sometimes even if I have, I sort of like to have like a, I don't know how to call it, like in paragraph internal link.
Yeah.
And that is usually under a heading that maybe is comparing the topic, the entity of this page that I am on to the one that I am linking to. And that's a small section, right? Where it has that internal link. But sometimes when I feel the topic is sort of big enough, and there's like, that's maybe when, okay, I still have that for the internal link, but I might have also a dedicated article just to cover it, because people just are looking for it and they're looking for that specifically. Do you see yourself lately going into just the pure top of funnel stuff?
Yeah, so like in some scenarios, yeah, absolutely, I could end up there, but it's often due to like constraints. I would say that, like, since AIO, I have been shifting like my focus more to kind of. Oh, you said only going for top funnel. Sorry, I misinterpreted the question. I was
No, but
going
just
only
go
for
on.
button funnel, but I was thinking of it only going for button funnel, but you also only going from top funnel. And maybe I would say that the scenario of that we talked about, maybe kind of cases like supplements or these kind of segments where you have so much problem to solution. When it's kind of very problem to solution heavy, you essentially need to take the client, or in cases where essentially there is no search demand for the actual product, you have an innovation or something like that on the product side. Those are the scenarios where you're going top to almost only top funnel, because essentially you can't open up an index for things that is not there yet. So of course you can create it, but you cannot generate any traffic. And in most of those cases, if they want to focus on SEO, it's probably not the right channel at the moment, but you can build up something that they could benefit when they're able to create the demand and when it's growing over time. So it's almost like building a foundation. So I would say that's rather the case where it's beneficial.
One of the things that I think is quite different about this maybe newer way or evolution of doing SEO, that it just includes more things to it. Like I feel traditional SEO got results maybe more due to chance than than this framework that maybe has more specific reasons why you're doing things and gives you maybe the best way to do something instead of just do it something however you want to do it. But maybe one of the biggest things is understanding an index and how and what patterns are you looking when you search a query and you're looking at those search results. For e-commerce stores, when you search for something and you're looking at those search results, what patterns are you looking for? How are you trying to get valuable information from that search result page?
It's so dependent, but like first of all, like of course, kind of intent. Like in most cases, as we said, most commercial terms, we are looking for collection pages. So when I'm looking at the SERP, I'm looking at features, and in most scenarios, we will see category pages, we will see popular products, we will see these kind of elements. Okay, how can I maximize my real estate here? And that's essentially how I'm approaching it. If it's a lot of like, people also ask features, so can I approach that? If it's AIOs, how do I approach that? So rather kind of approaching it from a SERP to page perspective, which I think is kind of the biggest maybe difference from like only going keyword logic, the old playbook, where like, okay, I want to rank here. Yeah, but you have like 10 different elements and 4 different approaches to reach that, and you need to build content in 4 different ways of handling that, because you need one product, you need one informational article, you need one category to cover all of these aspects to be able to get maximum visibility. And that's essentially what I'm looking for, like, and especially for kind of the core sections of the site. So that's how I'm starting off, and then I'm step by step building it into a kind of a topical map. Even though in some scenarios you build just a kind of a content network or a content logic structure for some sections, because you need to work on it step by step to be able to roll it out and get value, because that's kind of one of the constraints that I've seen with the kind of the logic, that you want to build a full structure, but in ecom you often need to get results, and you can get results with clients quicker, so you need to take it a bit more step by step, but having the holistic perspective with you while you're doing that. So I think that's important to have in mind.
It's sort of like in the ideal world where you are allowed to finish the house, you eventually finish it, but you build one room at a time.
Yeah, and you need to start where the profit is, because that's essentially what's going to drive both your ability as a consultant or in-house person to show that you can deliver a result, and also create a possibility to get kind of more resources and increase the scope of it, and actually building the full house. Very often, that's my feeling.
What are the biggest mistakes that you see people do when they try to maybe work on an e-com store? They're trying to do SEO. They're trying to improve their performance, right? They're trying to maybe implement some of these concepts. Where do you see they're getting, like, they're not understanding well, and that's why they try to implement something that doesn't make sense? Like, do you see something that stands out?
I think it's very hard to say, like, but I think kind of for ecom, I think since like the concept and how Corey describes the topical authority is very kind of informational, I think that most people think that you can only apply it on the informational side. And yeah, you can leverage it to get historical data and so on. But like, I think we have talked quite a lot about, both you and me, but like actually using the commercial pages to build it up. I think that's one thing that people are underestimating. And that doesn't mean you go old playbook. You can still kind of, as you said, implement distributional semantics. You can use kind of semantic buildings on FAQs. You can use semantic triples and all of these kind of parts of the logics. So that's kind of the mistake that I think a lot people are doing in a lot of scenario, that ends up being that they are not generating enough revenue per session, and in the end not getting as much profit that as they might have been able to do if they actually approached it in a slightly more commercial way early on in the project.
We've got this core update going on right now.
Yeah,
it's eventually going to be done. What do you usually look at after this, after core updates happen?
So for me, I'm very often like trying to look at kind of domains as winners and losers, of course. So I'm like, people are always talking, who's the winner, what are they doing, and so on. But I'm trying to aggregate quite a lot of data on domain level often, because core updates has lately been most about kind of site quality, or whatever you want to call it, aspects, which like maybe like 5-7 years ago were more focused on specific things. But since it's so much more ML involved, there are like thresholds, and then you're trying to understand like those kind of aspects. And the other thing that I'm often looking at is kind of shifts in indexes and intent, since it's happening so much during core updates. So do I need to combine pages? Do I need to open up new pages because there's new indexes? For ecom, that's very, very common that you need to reconfigure kind of that aspect of the core update. So often it's kind of, because ecom is probably not in general the most impacted ones in core updates, but I've also seen quite a lot of impact, and especially sites connected to kind of your money, your life segments in ecom and so on during the years. But I've seen it based on cost of retrieval in a lot of scenarios and so on as well. So yeah, trying to find patterns on the domains and looking at indexes. That's in general what I'm doing after core update.
I don't think that we can finish a podcast without talking at least one question about AI and what are your thoughts about it? What are you
Yeah.
doing about it? And are you using the information given by Bing Webmaster Tools in any way?
Bing Webmaster Tools, honestly, not yet. No, I wouldn't say so. And since I've said that, I've tried to focus quite a lot on the kind of the popular products as we talked about before. I've been digging quite a lot into all the data that people shared from studies on like how we know that Google is or ChatGPT has been scraping Google, and it's pretty clear that they have been really scraping the popular products elements. So like it's so interesting to see kind of the effects of those into also kind of the product sets of ChatGPT. So we're seeing kind of both on the study level, but also kind of on actual customer level that when you're improving your visibility in popular products, you are increasing as much on ChatGPT shopping, which essentially in the end, like that's why I'm focusing so much on those kind of product data aspects, because I believe that no matter if, of course, ChatGPT will not scrape forever. They have the ACP, they and these kind of ways of sending data. So in the end, we will send this kind of product data to multiple tools. And my hypothesis is that this is going to be the core elements for ecom moving forward in AI mode, in ChatGPT, to be able to generate traffic. It's not kind of like logics. Of course, you can build on mid funnel, upper funnel, and external sources and so on, which you will do in any case. But like on the actual commercial side of it, it's still kind of the product data that's going to be the most important and essential for these scenarios as well.
New listings, man. That's where the gold is.
I'm betting on it. You can hear that.
Yeah. Well, they've been around for a long time. They've become more
Yeah.
prominent over time, and we've been way too slow to get onto it compared to, I don't know, just any AI stuff from the last month or something. Like
Yeah.
that's where it
looking at the
is.
value you get from those and the kind of the conversion rates and so on compared to other traffic sources, it's to be honest crazy. And like I think people are underestimating all of those elements for a long time. People are slightly catching up. It was so fun because Kevin Indig launched a study like just a week before I went on stage and talked about my study. So people are actually finally doing some stuff about it, and hopefully we will together get a lot of more data about that. So yeah, it will be interesting.
Pontus, this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it quite a lot. It's awesome to be able to talk to someone who's quite into e-commerce, because there's just so many specific things about it that other people that don't focus on it might not know. So thank you for your time. If people want to reach out to you or anything, like where should they go?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best, but you can find me by searching my name on probably any platform. So that's a possibility.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.